It's about $1.75. So.
That's true. All right, are we ready?
And I'm ready.
Jose, I guess the first thing that everybody says, Jose Llano.
Llana.
Llana, excuse me.
It's okay.
Thank you. Jose Llana.
I'm sorry.
Doesn't sound like an Asian name.
Right. But actually, it's a very Filipino name, which is where I'm from. I was born in the Philippines, and Jose actually is a very common name in the Philippines. It's a very Spanish-influenced country. Among the Asian cultures, it's a very Latino culture. And moved to the States when I was 3, and I grew up in Virginia, right outside D.C. ever since then. So.
At the end of the performance, when the various cast members are coming forward and saying Seattle and wherever,
right.
Are they speaking as characters or as themselves?
Both. The first 6 people, the 6 principals who start, my character and Mei Li's character, my father's character, and Linda, we all say where our characters are from. But once the ensemble, the chorus, starts stepping forward and saying where they're from, that's actually where that actor is from. So it's a sort of a melding. It's sort of we're breaking that fourth wall, and we're actually making the story about us and about the actors and about the audience, and that was the intent. Actually, it was an accident. Bobbie, our director, and David Henry Wong never intended to do that in the original, concept of the show, but we were presenting a small version of the show, just a mini flower drum song, to producers and backers last May before the Broadway production, and Bobbie just needed a way to just close the presentation, and when someone had a random idea, why don't we just all step forward and say we're so and so looking forward to Broadway and blah blah blah. It brought the whole house down, and it just made the story, which already was a very personal story, made it even more personal, and the fact that we were telling a story about these immigrants who came from another land, that we as a company of actors are exactly that. And some of us were born in other countries, some of us were born in Brooklyn, New York, and some of us were born in Canada, some of us were born in where the story takes place. So I mean, I think as an extension of the reality of the story, it's bringing the story we're telling, 1958 Chinatown, to Dallas, 2003, where we are now. So it's a nice sort of crossover.
It really is. It's very effective, and I figured that. I began to think, I believe that's where that person really is from.
And I've done the show now this is my 3rd production. I did it in Los Angeles and Broadway and this show. And every show, whether there's an understudy on or one of the principals is on and they switch around positions, every show is completely different because at the end of the show, everyone says where they're from, and so the script is completely different at the end of the show. So it makes it different for me, and which is nice.
But it is 100% Asian American
Yes, it is.
cast.
Yes, it is, and we're very proud of that, actually. And I think the biggest difference between the show today and the show when it was written 40 years ago is the audience. Is that now not just Asian Americans, but the immigrants that have come to this country over the past 100 years, their children are now writing stories about that experience, and those people are the ones writing the stories, and that's what we're telling here.
This is an all-new version, an all-new script, as it were. And for people who maybe don't understand or haven't really thought that much about it, why did they feel it was necessary to write an all-new script?
I think, everything comes down to David Henry Wong. David Henry Wong was our playwright. He's the Tony winner for M. Butterfly, and when he saw The King and I in '96, actually it was a production that I was in. I was a supporting role in that. He just was sort of enthralled by it, and there were slight changes to the script. And he thought about, what's that other Asian show that no one's ever done? And it was Flower Drum Song, other Asian Roger and Hammerstein show besides South Pacific. And he looked it up, and he remembered how much he hated watching it as a kid. Having that conflict of, it's the only musical and first movie ever written about the Asian American, specifically Asian American experience. But it was written by people it was written by people who maybe didn't understand exactly what they were writing about. And he, as an Asian American who came to this country and grew up in the same sort of confines as my character Todd did, he felt like he could give it his own voice. And it was a big leap, you know, to go to Rodgers and Hammerstein Foundation and say, I'm David Henry Wong, I want to rewrite this story. But they trusted him because it is sort of a dated story, the way the original version was. It was written for the audience that they had in 1958, 57. But you know, 40 years later, there's a new audience and there's a new voice to the Asian American. I think that's why he wanted to write it.
Well, I must tell you that I really like the new version. I think it plays
Good.
very well.
Well, we love it too. We love it
Yes.
too.
You have to be about 10 feet off the ground with the reviews that.
Yeah, I just read it this morning. Actually, I got a lot of phone calls from my cast members this morning. 'Cause actors are funny. Like, a lot of people don't read reviews, some do. And the smart actors are the ones who know that if you do read a good one, to call that actor and to let him know, because I tend to stay away from them unless someone calls me to tell me to read it. And it was pretty nice this morning.
Now, you said that you have been in the New York show, the Broadway show, and in Los Angeles. And
Yes.
Have you already played Seattle?
I have played Seattle, personally. I did a show there called Martin Gare.
Oh, but you have not done this show in Seattle.
No. This is the first stop.
This is the first stop.
This is the first
okay.
stop.
And so you've been in 3 productions of it.
Yes.
Now, the one we're seeing here in Dallas and the one that will tour, is it exactly like the New York production?
Almost exactly. Almost exactly. I think the biggest difference is the cast. Is that we have half the same cast, half is different, but because it's such an actor-driven piece, it's the chemistries are different. My leading lady, Yuka, is different from Lea Salonga. Just putting a different person in the parts sort of changes the whole chemistry of the show. But it's the same script, same sets, same costumes, same Broadway caliber. So.
The sets and the costumes are really just so marvelous
Yeah.
and just sumptuous, really.
Exactly.
Some of the costumes are supposed to be from the Chinese opera, and obviously they're not the original costumes. But how authentic are those costumes?
Oh, very. Oh, very. For the Broadway production and L.A., and Jamie Guan was our Chinese opera consultant. He was actually handpicked when he was, I think, a small child. He was about 8 years old by the wife of Chairman Mao. So he went to school for Chinese opera. He was schooled in it his entire childhood and adult life, and he's become a master at it. And I think he also worked with David Henry Wong for M. Butterfly. There was Chinese opera in that as well. David and Bobbie, they wanted to bring as much authentic Chinese opera into this. That's one of the biggest differences between our show and the main and the original production, is that there was really no Chinese opera in that one. The costumes are authentic. Actually, I think one of the costumes, they are authentic Chinese opera costumes. Like they did not build it for this production. They actually purchased them from a Chinese opera theater company in Beijing, I believe, and they rigged it so that we could take it on and off a little easier because they're very hard to get into. Like I remember in LA, we were trying them on, and it took about 5 minutes to put it on. And so we just took a pair of scissors, slid it up the side, and rigged it so that we could get into it easier. But they're all very authentic, and the headdresses are reproductions. And these big, I think they're ostrich feathers that they use. I think each one feather costs, I think, like $1,000 or something. They're authentic, and they guard those feathers very closely because they wanted to have the dancers to move in the way that the Chinese opera dancers would move. And I think it adds a great layer to the show.
One of the production numbers, the Fan-Tan, is just such fun to watch.
It's the best number. It's the best.
How difficult is that for the dancers?
Oh, you know what? I always wondered how they don't drop the fans all the time. You know, can't they put like a little tie wrist on it or something? But no, a tribute to the dancers and the choreographer to the show. My one sister, I have an older sister who I adore and love. She comes to see everything I do. And right after she saw the show, I asked her right away, so what was your favorite part? She's like, oh my God, the Fan-Tan. Oh, I mean yours. Your stuff was great too. But she's a dancer as well, my sister, not professionally, but she, for days, all she could talk about was the Fantan number. She loved it to death. And it's great, actually, the Fantan number now is even longer than it was on Broadway. The few changes that they've made, they took what was amazing, that what was most well received on Broadway, which were the Fantan number, and they added about, I think, a good 20 seconds to it. So it's a little longer.
I told you last night when we met briefly that you just have a marvelous voice,
Thank
great
you.
pipes, as you say.
Thank you very much.
What is your background as a singer?
Well, I grew up in Virginia singing a lot of the choral music that you sing in public school, and musical theater, obviously. Grew up listening to West Side Story and Les Miserables, and then I knew I wanted to perform, and I knew I wanted the classical training, the sort of the professionalism that comes with that, and the stamina. So I actually went to school for opera at the Manhattan School of Music for a year. I went there straight out of high school, which was a big leap. A lot of people don't go straight to conservatory after high school, but I did. So I was a freshman in conservatory at Manhattan School of Music learning opera, and it didn't meld very well with me. I was actually about to transfer to the Royal Academy of Music in London to study more a theater background mixed with a musical theater background. But then my freshman year in college, I got my first show. So that was The King and I in '96. So I have thankfully been working since then. We're sort of learning on the way.
You did King and I where?
On Broadway.
Ah.
Yeah, that was my first job. I got it when I was 18.
Were you with the Lou Diamond Phillips?
Yes, I was.
Ah.
I was the young lover. I was Linta.
Ah, yes, of course.
Yeah. So that was my first show. I was very new, very green. I was 18 when I got the job. I was 19 when we opened on Broadway. And in a really great part, got to sing 2 great songs. And, as an introduction to Broadway, it was a dream. I mean, the big joke in the cast was I was the oldest kid, You had all these kids between the ages of 4 years old and 15 playing the children in the show. And I was just 4 years older than the oldest kid playing, the young lover. So the big joke, too, was that the last show I had done was I was a senior in high school. That was the last show I'd done, and here I was. It was very quick, and I was very lucky. I was in the right place at the right time in the right show, and I'm always very thankful for that. And Rogers Hammerstein have always the theater company, organization, and Mary Rogers. They gave me my first job, my first big break, and so I always sort of come back to them, and I've always been thankful for that. And Mary has always welcomed me into her home, so she's a great lady.
Great contact.
Yeah.
Great
and her
contact.
son, actually, Adam Gettle, is another composer, a very gifted composer. He wrote Floyd Collins, and we did a show off-Broadway together called Saturn Returns. So my association with the Rogers family has been through my entire career, and it's been very, very lucky for that. And now I'm back doing another show. I mean, Ted Chapin, he's in charge of the Rogers and Hammerstein Foundation. He wrote me the most amazing note on opening night for the Broadway, a Flower Drum song. He said, well, you've done The King and I, now you're doing Flower Drum, now we have to write another show for you in our R&H for you to do. And that was very kind of him to say that. So as the leading man Asian roles go, I think I've done them all in the R&H library.
In this production, has any new music been added, or is it all the original Rogers and Hammerstein music?
Technically all original, because one song that was actually omitted before it got to Broadway originally, it was the song that they reinstated back into the show called My Best Love, which Uncle Chin sings to me in the second act. That song was originally written for my father's character in the original Broadway, and it got cut before it got to Broadway. But now they reinstated it. So that's the only new song, technically new song that's back, that's in the show. They've cut one song, it's called The Other Generation, which was sung by the children in the show, and those characters have also been sort of streamlined out of the show, I guess. But I think also when David approached them to rewrite the show, their only stipulation was you cannot change one lyric of any song. And that was a big hurdle for him, obviously. And I think it's sort of genius the way that he did it, that he basically took all the songs out, lifted them from the script, rewrote the whole score, rewrote the whole script, and inserted the songs in, and gave them all different meanings. And within the context of the show and how they come in the show now, they've changed meaning. Like Sunday is a whole different meaning now, and Like a God is now sort of like at the end of the show, it's sort of the triumphant, we've realized it, this is the end of our journey. Whereas in the original production, Like a God was his song about Linda. He was singing a song to Linda about how much he loved Linda. So it just, the whole context of the show is different. But the interesting thing is that every lyric of every song is exactly how it was written originally. And that was the only stipulation that the Rogers people wanted. Because obviously Mr. Rogers is no longer with us, so they didn't want to sort of, take away that magic from the music.
I guess that's reasonable, but that makes me appreciate this new version all the more, I must say. Okay, hang on just a second. Oh, okay, this will be the last question then. Jose, have you done any non-ethnic roles?
Yes, and actually, Flower Drum Song and King and I have sort of bookended my career as really my only Asian roles I've ever played. I'm a very lucky person that I've come into Broadway. I came into Broadway in the early 90s where non-traditional casting is what it's called, has really just plowed its way through and given a lot of great opportunities for actors like myself. After The King and I did a show in the New York Shakespeare Festival at the Delacorte in Central Park called On the Town, and I played the Gene Kelly role. And it was an amazing opportunity. I just finished The King and I was 20 years old, and George Wolfe, the director, wanted to hire 6 unknown, fresh talents to play the 6 leads of the show, and he hired this random 20-year-old Filipino kid to play the romantic lead of the show. And I think that, for me, was King and I started my career, gave me a great first job. On the Town sort of started my career in that after that show, every casting director in New York was given the license to see me as something other than an Asian American actor, or an ethnic actor, any ethnic. After that, I did a show called Street Corner Symphony, where it was predominantly, the entire cast was African American, and I was the only non-African American in the show. After that, I did Rent, and I played a Latino. So that was another ethnic role. But then Martin Guerre came along, and Cameron McIntosh was producing that. And it was a show, it was the third in the Les Mis Saigon trilogy. And when they did it in the West End, it was a French story set in 16th century France. And it was an entirely Caucasian cast in the West End. And when they brought it to America, for the American cast, they hired me as the bad guy. I was the villain in that. So I was Guillaume, was my name, and I was playing a Frenchman in 16th century France. So I mean, I think honestly that's why I love musical theater. I love theater. The opportunities as an ethnic actor are so much more apparent for me in the theater because people come to see theater and expect to imagine and expect to see actors playing parts. And thankfully, hopefully, being a singer and being a dancer opens more doors for me coming in. If I can sing that part better than those guys, then you'll forgive the fact that I'm Filipino and let me play a Frenchman, And I think I'm very lucky that my career has been full of non-ethnic roles. And again, there have been people that came and saw the show and said, "What's this random Asian guy playing this part?" But I think every time I do see that, personally, when I go see a random show and I see, an African American woman playing the daughter of 2 Caucasian people, that to me is empowering. It's because I go beyond just what they look like and listen to the story and what they're really trying to say. And I think that really that's where the power of theater is. So I've been very lucky that way. Very lucky.
And the people who hire you have been lucky too.
Well, thank you.
I say thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
It's been really wonderful having this chance to talk with you.
Thank you.
Just stay where you are. Now he's going to move the camera.
And get the shot.
Okay.
I'm sure you're used to people saying, your name doesn't sound Asian.
Exactly. But it is. It's very Filipino.
Okay, all right. Some of the costumes are supposedly from the Chinese opera. How authentic are those costumes?
Very authentic. Very authentic.
Are these costumes reproduced?
Some are, but most are from the original Peking Opera Company.
Okay. let's see. Okay. The fan-tan dance looks like it would be very difficult for the dancers.
It is, but it's also the best number in the show.
Let's see. Okay. Why was it necessary to change the script and have a new script?
Well, David, it meant a lot to David to write something new.
All right. Is there any new music in this production?
Technically, no.
You did the show in New York and in LA, and now you're doing it in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Dallas production different from those productions?
Nope, it's entirely the same. Just new people.
Okay. Let's- What is your background in the business?
Started as a classical singer. Moved right into musical theater for the past 10 years.
Okay. Just keep talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've been very lucky to work in the jobs that I've had, and coming into New York and Broadway, and done a lot of great shows at the right place at the right time. So and now I'm in Dallas. I mean, I have a job that lets me to go all over the country, and I can be at any party and say, "Oh, Dallas! Oh, yeah, I've been to Dallas." I mean, I can add Dallas to the list now. You know.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Let's see. Costumes. I think those are the main points. Just hang on, Harry, 1 second. You must be about 10 feet off the ground after the reviews.
Yeah, he had a great time reading them this morning. I'm going to probably frame it and mail it to my mom. She can hang it on next to the ones that she always frames whenever she likes a review of mine. But it's very nice, and I heard that Lawson doesn't give a lot of reviews like that, so I'm very thankful.
Okay, that should do it. All right.